Hello, Ken Weller here with New Tech Inventors. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we've utilized our filament counter to control the amount of filament going to our printers during the print process. And what the filament counter does, it takes a full roll of filament and then takes off just the amount that you need and puts it on an empty spool to run a print job on a printer. And you continue that process till you have put the proper amount of filament on like 5 different spools. Then you load those 5 spools on 5 printers and start them printing. And when they're finished printing, then there's no filament left over, just a small amount, a small, less than a meter of filament left. So what this does for us, it allows us only to open and work off of one full spool of filament and just taking what we need as we need it. And when that spool is depleted, then we open another new spool. This is working real well. A few videos back you saw where I came up with the idea of this filament counter and built the prototype, and now I'll be building a second one because I need one up here at the house. The other one's down at the other print farm, and it's working out real well. So this video is going to show you a little bit about how that's been helping us. A couple of subscribers, a couple of you wondered what happened to me for the past 10 days. I actually took a much needed vacation and took the grandsons to Florida. We went to Daytona Beach, and while we were down there last week, we went to Cape Canaveral and watched the launch of SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. And pretty impressive. Something that at least once in a lifetime you'd have to actually be there on the grounds up close and personal to watch one of those launches. So anyway, I had a great time down there, did a little deep sea fishing and so forth. Now I'm back here and having to get back into things. When I leave, there's no one else left here, so I had to shut everything down. So everything's been shut down for over a week, and now I'm trying to get things back up and running again. So that's why I've been a little quiet on the videos for the past week or so, but now that we're getting the ball rolling again, I'll be cranking out these videos and showing you how things are progressing. Running 7 or 8 of these King runes is about the limit on my power up here with my computers and other things going on. And the other printers up in here I'm able to experiment around with them and test things out. So a little bit more about the old I hadn't realized it'd been a long time since we showed what was going on up here, but there is still activity doing a job up here at the house at the old print farm. Even though we've got the new print farm going and most of my videos you've been seeing have been down there, we don't want to forget these little guys up here because they're still chugging away. And okay, on these 3 printers here, we're running orange PLA. This is our spool of orange PLA. You can see there's not a lot left on it. However, what we did do, we took our filament counter and counted off filament here and here on these 2 spools for these 2 print jobs, printing these parts. So shortly as these finish, we'll be able to see if our filament counter and our slicer software gave us good information, and we took just enough filament and put on these empty spools to run these two jobs. These parts right here are almost finished. These are getting real close. This one's getting close to being finished. And as you can see, the filament's getting pretty low on these, so we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that it works out. Okay, this job just finished. Looks good. Now we're going to retract the filament. Okay, this second one just finished. Looks like we're all done. Used up almost all the filament. Let me retract, pull the filament out here. And that's what we had left. So, very little wasted filament. Okay. We'll go ahead and power these two down. And take the parts. We'll take them over there to check them out. And our leftover filament. Okay. This is the filament that was left on the two printers. I had calculated on leaving about 1 meter, and that's about what we've got here. About 1 meter of filament. About 1 meter of filament left on each printer. That's because we use the filament counter to count off the filament we were going to use to print these two jobs here. We just took these off the printer. These are our parts. Usually just flex this thing a little bit and get these parts to pop off of here. And okay, other than a few strings there, that one looks pretty good. Let's check this one. And we'll just pop these parts off the same way. Okay, so there's the 36 parts that we printed with PLA, and we printed them on 2 king rooms, and this is our leftover filament, which is what we calculated. We used the filament counter so that we could print these parts without having to open up 2 spools of filament to run on the printer. We actually took the filament that we printed these with off of another spool that's currently running another job right now. So the filament counter and the slicer software do give us accurate measurements, and we could calculate it a little bit closer and have even less than this, but you have to have enough to get through the filament sensor and down the tube. So that's about a third of this. But that's not a lot of waste, considering what we would normally have to deal with. And our spools are empty, so we don't have to worry about packaging those up and trying to keep them dry. Okay, our second job just finished, and we'll be removing these parts. So there are other jobs we printed. Got a little bit of a few little strings on there, but overall looks pretty good. So there's all of our PLA printing. All that remains now are the PETG printers, and let's go see how they're doing here. Okay, this is coming along pretty good. This is coming along real good. It's going to take a while. Take a long time to print. Okay, this is the spool that we originally got the filament for all three of these jobs off of, and then we left the spool to run this print job here. So we'll take that remaining filament, package it back up, and call it a day for the PLA. And we'll keep this PETG stuff going. These are going to go a few more hours, and these are getting close. Probably they're both, this one's looks like it's probably about 45 minutes to go. This one still has about an hour to an hour and a half to go. And we'll take these spools, and the next job's coming up. We'll rewind these with filament, with the exact amount of filament we need for the print jobs. And when the print job's finished, this is what the spools will look like. May have this little bit of filament left, like we did on these jobs. But other than that, it's going to be very economical on our filament usage. Okay, it's the next day, and it looks like all of our print jobs have finished. The last thing to print on this printer was this base part, and on this printer were 4 of the female connectors, and on these 2 printers were male rod-end connectors. Now, the important thing is the filament. On these 4 printers, we've run several print jobs on them. We calculated the amount of filament needed, and then took a full spool of black PETG filament and used our filament counter to take off the calculated amount to run the jobs, totaling up to about 24 hours on these 4 printers. And then we put that on these empty spools. Okay, now we're going to check and see how much filament's left on these spools. On this printer, as you can see, there's very little left. Very little left here. Very little. They're all just about empty. And you notice this spool of solder in here. When these spools get down to where the end on these roller type parts, they'll come off of that if you don't have some added weight. So sometimes I have to add weight to those. I'm going to set the camera here for a minute and remove the filament. Since these had quit late last night, I had to reheat the hot ends to be able to remove the remaining filament. Okay, I've removed it now, so I'm going to go ahead and power these things down. And as you can see, the parts on these ouch. The bed was preheated on this one. I have to let that thing cool down a little bit. These parts are loose. This bed preheated too, but part came off okay. These parts are coming off. They'll come off a little bit better when it cools down a little bit. But anyway, the main thing we're interested in is this filament. That's how much filament we had left on that one. Let's spool that much. Okay, and here. Okay. Sorry, doing this with one hand is a little hard. This is for, let's see, 24 hours on each printer. That's not bad to have that little scrap. And now I have 4 empty spools that I don't have to worry about putting in plastic bags and adding silica gel and trying to keep the moisture out and so forth. So the counter, the filament counter, this is how it's saving me money. So I'm going to, pretty quickly, I'm going to assemble another one that I can have up here, because I had to actually go down to the print farm where the other one is to spool these. So I've got the parts and everything. I'm going to go ahead and put another one together for up here so I can continue to do this, because it does save an awful lot of time. I only have to open one spool of filament at a time and then just take off what I need for the jobs using that particular black PETG or orange or whatever. We did the same thing with the orange. Showed that to you a little bit earlier in the video, but this is how we did it using the PETG, and everything seemed to work out pretty good. Yeah, these are coming off a lot easier now it's cooling down. So we've got a lot of these strong parts. We just put out a video about making these parts stronger. Okay, we finished our printing up here in the bonus room for right now. This is where we're at. We basically printed these strong parts up here for the Helping Hand tabletop base mount. And the other thing we did as we were printing those, we utilized our filament counter to load these empty spools with the proper amount of filament to complete the print job. And on this print job I had I was using 4 Kingroom KP3 printers with the PETG filament and 3 Kingroom KP3s with orange PLA. With the orange PLA we had a spool that was almost empty of orange PLA. So what we did, we took off, we took 2 empty spools, and we used the filament counter to put just enough PLA on those spools to complete those print jobs, which was printing these orange parts that you see here. Okay, we finished printing, and 2 of the printers had empty spools with just the right amount of filament on them, and then the 3rd printer had the spool that was the source of the filament for these 2, and there's still quite a bit left on it. But you can see by the tight coils that there wasn't a whole lot of filament left on the spool. We were down near the end. So we loaded the filament on. One thing that with the King Rune, it doesn't have a spool holder. It has a little roller bearing cradle that the spool sits in, and that works fine as long as you've got a full spool. But when you get down to these small coils and the light weight of a practically empty spool, you have a little bit of problem, and what we have to do is end up adding a little weight inside the spool hole, and that's usually in the form of a roll of solder or something to keep it from coming off the spool holder. Now on the 4 jobs that were running the PETG, I was printing 5 of these pieces at a time. So I was printing 5 at a time, and that would have been one print job. This would have been the next one, and I was running like about 3 of them consecutively over that 24-hour period that I printed these parts. I figured how much filament it needed for the first 5, how much it needed for the second 5, and how much it needed for the third 5. And I totaled up all of that filament. And then I took an empty spool with my filament counter and loaded that amount of filament on the spool. This is what I had left. So the count was pretty accurate, and I allowed to have a little bit left because you're going to have some in the tube, a little bit left at the on the roll itself. So it did come out pretty accurate, and this was the amount left on another spool, and this was on another spool. So you can see, and just to give you a perspective, this is about, gosh, actually less than a meter. So I had less than a meter of filament left when I was finished. That's not bad. Plus, I ended up with empty spools that I didn't have to worry about putting them in plastic and trying to moisture proof them and everything else. And I had good filament, fresh filament, and all of these parts were printed with the same filament off the same roll. So that's kind of the story behind the filament counter and how it helped me in this process. Okay, on these stress parts where we have breaking problems, we want to make sure that we don't have any sharp inside edges. So as you can see, we camphor and put fillets in here to round out these inside edges. And you can see how we've rounded this edge here to keep from having a sharp breaking point there. We could round it a little bit more. We've got to make room for this piece here to be able to rotate. this inside here is rounded to keep from having a sharp breaking point. On this one, I probably do need to go back in and round out these inside corners here. Okay, here's our table base 44, and we're going to go ahead and round these inside edges to about 2.5. And we'll do this one we'll go about 2.5 on that one also. Okay, that'll help reduce that breaking point there. And I'll do that. The outside, we don't really have a clear and present straight edge because of the way this square intersects with the round. So that will help strengthen that